welcome to the DRGN podcast. And if you want to learn where we got that name, you're going to learn in our episode 0, available to subscribers only. And it's a combination between that and the ARG, which I know everyone here has taken part in.
Yeah, to call it an ARG is a little bit of a simplification. Many people are calling it a new social movement or perhaps a new religion, but we don't like either of those terms because we're non-political and non-religious and definitely not a cult. So let me ask you a different, more important question. Why'd you give homeless people Teslas?
I gave homeless people Teslas because I thought it would be a really good idea to help people out. I wanted to give them the ability to have the means of production because I'm a dirty communist.
Yeah.
And it turns out, and you may be surprised here, that's not how you help people.
I mean, it's how you tried to help people, so that's good.
I mean, it definitely is how I tried to help people. And it's not fair to say it was homeless people. These were people who had previously been homeless, who were recently homed. And I wanted to give them the ability to basically to have a business immediately. And we were working on it. It was a Tesla-based like executive chauffeur service, so an executive car service. So we had everybody dress in suits that were the colors of the cars that they had, like they were some chauffeur Power Rangers, and they loved it. Like everybody, you know, the drivers loved it, the clients loved it, but even with having like exclusivity contracts and you know, handshake deals with various, you know, resorts and whatnot in the area that we were working in, it still wasn't enough to support the business itself, primarily because the people we gave the cars to kind of kept stealing money.
Let me give an example of this. One person came to my Facebook and said the following thing. You targeted people with mental illness, drug addictions, and homosexuals and strung out transsexuals and lent them Teslas to make them slaves. And then you took our cars away from us so that we couldn't get business loans and left us hanging. This is a scam. Matt picked me up at a Motel 6 in Albuquerque where I was prostituting. He pulled up, and a young man in a suit in a chauffeur hat jumps out of the doors, and then we proceed to the nearest adult accessory store where I needed a new dildo and condoms and lube. And so that was pretty good. That's a pretty good story.
I have no idea what the fuck that's talking about.
Yeah, well, that's what one of our former employees.
Oh,
not full employees, actually partners, right? Partners.
Yeah, because the thing is that we weren't hiring anybody. We were making people business partners,
Right.
And the concept is that we were helping them develop their own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the people that we were helping or thought we were helping were just unstable.
Yeah, and there were some good people in the mix.
Absolutely. There were a few people who were just amazing.
Unfortunately, some of them were also clearly suffering from disorders that lead them to get an opportunity, fail to do the work for the opportunity, and then blame you when they fail.
Yo, yeah. And I mean, like, listen, you and I grew up poor. And we know exactly what it's like.
Well, this is why I wasn't afraid. You know, our work was being done in the war zone, right?
Yeah.
Tell us more about the war zone.
Okay, so I don't like using the term, even though it's
the International District.
Yes, it's the International District of Albuquerque, New Mexico, is extremely impoverished and has a high crime rate simply because it's
where they put the poorest.
It's
most minoritized population.
Right. It's where they put the most at-risk individuals. They basically shove them there.
And they put all the social services there. So if you're homeless and you need social services, you're there. If you're in a halfway house, you're there.
Precisely. And the problem with it is that I have been in fewer places more dangerous than that area of Albuquerque. I have been in and around Mexico, and I've been, you know, in downtown Dallas, downtown Chicago, like south of Chicago. Never did I just see randos with assault rifles on their backs, and these weren't like your gun-toting,
No,
Al
these are
Qaeda.
just people keeping themselves protected
Yeah.
because who knows when you need to return fire.
Right, and just the sheer amount of people who are unfortunately like strung out on fentanyl, and
They'll just waddle into the street.
one of our drivers
Yeah.
had come to me on multiple occasions, being like, "Hey, check out this photo of a dead body I saw today."
You know, he was pretty attuned to seeing the dead bodies, and he was right.
Yeah. That's when I decided that I needed to reassess some things.
So, like being in the ABQ.
Yeah. Listen, Albuquerque can be a lovely place in some areas, but it's got its problems. It's got some serious issues, and the issues I think stem from two major things. One is that there is and has always been this like racist, like white overlord
Yeah,
population.
the white supremacy is insane.
The white supremacy in Albuquerque is insane. And the other thing is that Albuquerque is the poorest, not Albuquerque, but New Mexico is the poorest blue state. It wants to help its people. It gave out like 2 extra stimulus checks after
to help the people during
to help
the
the people
pandemic.
with their families and whatnot. It wanted to help. After it legalized recreational marijuana, it took the taxes from that and it gave everybody another stimulus check. And then it made state college free.
So it sounds like as a blue state, they're investing in their people. In a generation or two, things are going to be better off than they are.
I mean, theoretically.
I'll give you a systemic error. When I was taking out some loans for some of these cars,
Yeah,
I was trying to get money for those loans.
right.
They don't ask, where do you plan on driving the car? They just ask where you live. But when I had an address listed in New Mexico as where I was going to purchase the car, they said no. When I had the address I was going to purchase it in Washington, they said yes. Because they're not allowed to say we don't want to lend money to people in New Mexico, but they do not want to lend money to people in New Mexico.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. When I was working on business loans for this business, I was incapable of finding anyone who'd be willing to give loans in New Mexico. New Mexico just had like no business loans that they were willing to give out. They're like, if you jump through all of these hoops, we'll give you like $4,000.
Yeah, and I looked into it, and there's a lot of business loans available in Washington State, and a lot of banks say, well, we're local banks and we invest locally. And what that means is people like those in New Mexico aren't going to get those loans.
Right. And, there's probably factors involved, racism and the patriarchy aside, but...
Well, I mean, it's a self what is it called? A downward spiral, right?
Right.
The racism leads to objective indicators that justify more racism because you're like, oh, well, I'll lose money because people are racist against them. What?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And yeah, like you're saying, we're used to South Texas, which has a lot of poverty.
Yeah, we're used to South Texas, which just has an insane amount of poverty, and like I went through the international district on multiple occasions, and my wife was like, "What are you doing over there? It's extremely dangerous over there." And I'm like, I'm just used to places like that.
Yeah, this is
I
where we're
grew
from.
up in a place exactly like this.
Right. I wasn't afraid of anybody there.
Yeah,
I
no.
literally felt no fear at any time in that place.
Right. Because I know better. I know that, shooting randos is not a thing that people of that demographic do. They shoot someone because that person either screwed with them or impugned their honor in some way.
Yeah, or whatever it is that justifies the violence in the society. If the only way that your safety is assured is that people believe in your strength, then you must maintain belief in your strength. And when society has collapsed all around you, and there is still a system keeping people from working together, and that's the real problem. Because what happens if the people in the international district got together and started running their own industry? What if they got together and started lending themselves their own money? What if they got together and started running their own education systems? The people with sticks in their hands and guns on their hips would come and beat them upside the head. They're forced into that ghetto and not allowed to do otherwise.
Right. And that's where I was stepping in, and I didn't have money. Like I did this on the back of your credit.
Yeah, I don't have money either. I'm just a professor.
Yeah.
But I do have the ability to say I'll pay you later.
Yeah,
Or
and
at least I did.
yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those things where you work really hard on something that you believe in, and then it just continues to crumble around you.
Yeah. In retrospect, if we had had a social worker to come in and see the wheat from the chaff, that might have helped.
I mean, yeah, that would definitely have helped. And, I think that starting things off from that level, from that place of ignorance, definitely didn't help, right?
Right.
It didn't help our situation. But I think that, like, I'm not going to blame the people who live in the international district. It's like, no. In the same way that I don't blame homeless people for getting on drugs. It's like, if you were being homeless, not having shelter, access to shelter, not being allowed to have access to shelter is torture.
And
no time in the history of mankind, other than now, have people done that.
it is. It's just so obvious because in all human culture before this, if one of your fellow human beings was without a home, you would open your house to them.
Right.
And it's so rare that someone would be in that situation as well. If every church in America let one homeless person stay at the church, or one person in the congregation, or the congregation put them up somewhere. Anyway, if every church in America adopted one homeless person like it was a law, we wouldn't have enough homeless people to go around.
Right. If I remember correctly, it was like, if it was spread amongst just Christian churches,
Right.
Just Christian churches
yeah.
evenly,
Yeah.
then they would have to take care of 1/3 of a homeless person.
Yeah. And that seems pretty fair to me. It also seems that if they don't want to do that, perhaps a small tax that goes directly to housing people without houses, maybe food for the hungry, maybe care for orphans. I don't know, just things that Jesus said you should do objectively.
Yeah. It sounds like some kind of communist pinko.
Well, yes, Jesus was clearly an anarcho-socialist.
I have to ask a question. What's a pinko?
So you understand that pink is red but lighter colored, right?
Yeah, I get that
And
much.
it's feminine. Red is the communist color.
Yes.
The Ruskies, red
Right,
Ruskies, yeah.
right. So they wanted to, like, demasculinize
The emasculated, right?
Right,
Exactly.
okay.
Because there's the F slur after you say pinko.
Oh, flamingo.
Pinko flamingo. That's correct. Because we're being broadcast on television.
Seriously.
Yeah.
To get back to the subject at hand.
Right.
So we got these cars. We got these driver suits. We would set them up.
Cell phones.
Yep, we got them cell phones, the nicest phones on the market, and we set them off, and quite a few of them lost, quote unquote, the cell phones.
Yeah. So
And then
I haven't talked to you about this, but I've been thinking about it.
okay.
I think maybe we trusted one person with bad information.
Uh-huh.
You see what I'm saying? Like, maybe there were a few better people we were working with, and then we just trusted one person who was giving us bad information the entire time. And you see what I'm saying?
I mean, like, it'd be easy to just blame.
It would be ezy to blame
just to
one
blame
person.
the one person.
It's the whole system.
Yeah. It was the whole system that we designed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although there was a really good guy, and he had a couple other people.
Yeah.
He was a really good guy.
Yeah, dude, that guy was amazing, and I'm not going to use names here
Yeah, of
because
course.
That's disrespectful. But yeah, we had one guy, and he had other people working with him, and
Yeah.
he believed in the project in the same
So
way that we
good.
believed in the project.
I really wish we could have kept him going, but by that time we were so burnt out from worrying every night.
Yeah. Like, the fact of the matter is that it came to the point where some of the people we were working with, we weren't sure weren't going to, steal the cars, drive them to Mexico, sell them off, and
Right.
yeah.
And so, or they were setting up rides. I mean, there was some real cash flow going on.
Yeah.
I mean, they were setting up rides and then not showing up, and
Yeah, and I know because I had to do those rides.
right, you'd have to
Like-
jump in at
like-
4 in the morning.
Yeah, all hours of the night, I was having to jump in. I was having to go do rides. Like, I was getting very little sleep. I went from working until like 3 in the morning, and then I get called at like 6 in the morning because I need to go pick up some people who are freaking 3 hours north of where I lived, 3 hours north, so that they could get to the airport. And of course, I did that ride. That ride paid buco.
Yeah, like that's worth the $300 as well. Right?
Yes,
like $100 an hour. Okay,
Yeah.
right. That's why it seems so reasonable that you could get people in on this and get them going.
One of the biggest, I think, hurdles was definitely the insurance costs for doing this kind of work.
The insurance cost more than the cars, and the cars were the peak price of Teslas.
Yep. Before Teslas started nosediving in price, yeah.
So yeah, it was something like $50,000 for one Tesla, and these were Model 3s. And on top of that, so the payments were like, let's say $1,100 a month. And then the commercial insurance was another $1,200 per car per month. And it was obscene how much more you had to pay.
Right. And then it doesn't help that Albuquerque got a pretty big, pretty big sample size of, car crashes. And so we had 2 vehicles out at one point.
Yeah, just because other people were crashing into them.
Yeah, other people were crashing into these cars. One time, the car was parked.
Yeah.
And then that particular one took almost a year before the
Tesla parts just weren't available.
Yeah, before we could get a replacement door.
Yeah. On top of that, the danger that all the cars were in. I mean, when they charged that much for insurance, they were right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they were right to charge that much for insurance, but it's like the location was probably not the best place to start, and
you want to go touchless through the car wash so that the water itself, that the brush doesn't scratch the paint. But also, how do you go touchless through?
I believe I refer to it as a mud storm.
Mud storm.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes. So
the
you have
annual mud storms.
Annual? No. So you'd have a sandstorm, right?
Everybody's normal sandstorm.
Normal sandstorm.
Like you see on Tatooine.
Yeah, like you see on Tatooine, where I was living.
Yes.
And then it starts to rain at the same time. Real hard to keep a car clean in that.
I mean,
Also, it turns out living in a sandblaster isn't that good for the coat.
yeah. So this is why I always said the Tesla was the Bugatti of Albuquerque.
It really was, because what you were dealing with there, you had nearly everyone we drove was like, I've never been in a Tesla. It's like yeah. I mean, like, they weren't super common there. They had, towards the end of our tenure of the business, they had built a Tesla dealership in the Rio Rancho area, which is slightly north of Albuquerque. Previous to that, you'd have to go all the way up to Santa Fe.
Right. They have to keep it on American Indian land because it's illegal in New Mexico to do the direct-to-consumer model that Tesla does.
Right. Direct-to-consumer model, had that been available for, pretty much any other car company to do, we wouldn't have the absorbent prices we pay having to buy cars on lot.
Yeah.
Something like 20% less. We'd be paying 20% less on cars.
Crazy markup just so that there can be this upper middle class of middlemen that sell cars.
You think that they're upper middle class? I have done that job, and I can tell you that they aren't even middle class.
Oh, I just meant the owner?
Oh, yeah, the owner, definitely.
Because the owner's not like a rich person?
No, the owner is upper middle class, and the people who work in car dealerships have a tendency to make maybe enough to cover their bills. Sometimes they'll get a good commish, and they'll have a big chunk of change. But that's like being a server at a restaurant and you get a big tip. Oh, that's going to disappear instantly.
Right, because it's you are already living in a way that requires all of your income.
Right.
So if you get an opportunity to use that money to have a better life experience, you're doing the right thing, blowing it all on a great life experience now, because if you don't, it's all going to disappear to bills anyway.
Yep, it'll disappear to bills. It'll turn into a hospital visit that you have to pay for because you have the money.
Yeah.
It'll turn into a lot of things that you can't control. And just frankly, it would be easier if you didn't have the money. So you might as well blow it, which is, this thing that I think that people who are
Privileged with wealth.
who are privileged with wealth do not understand. They think they see poor person on food stamps has new iPhone, and they're like, that person's taking advantage of the system. It's like, you don't know that person didn't receive that as a Christmas gift or something from a relative.
Yeah, and
you don't know what that person's life is like.
Right. And the problem is that they're thinking, well, someone's getting something that I'm not. And what they don't see is all the stuff that they're getting that they think they're working for, because the system designs the social support for everyone to be hidden more and more the higher up you go.
Right. So, like, to go back to Elon Musk from episode
Welfare
0,
Queen Musk, yeah.
Welfare Queen Musk, whose entire wealth is based off of our money as taxpayers, is the reason why he is a billionaire.
Look, Solar City was supported by the government. The obviously SpaceX prize, that was a government move to eliminate NASA. Tesla was going to go under without the Obama era stimulus investment back into Tesla. The money that's now going into Tesla for all of the superchargers, even though we fired the supercharger team, and the weirdest FU to giving me money I've ever seen. All of these things are incredible government. The only non-government boondoggle he has was buying Twitter and then destroying a well-known brand and turning it into X.
Yeah, and turning it into something that, like, at face value, oh, that's a porn site.
Well, when you go there, there's also porn.
Oh.
Like hardcore pornography videos.
What was the address to the website again?
X.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is that maybe we shouldn't let billionaires exist. Maybe it's a bad idea to let someone have that much access to wealth, right?
So my concern is the invented wealth is much, much worse than the real wealth because of the tenuous nature of invented wealth. When your money comes from stocks and stocks aren't real, you have to do everything you can to make them as real as possible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's completely understandable that people would be upset at hearing that because they have been tricked into putting their retirements into the stock market.
That stock market is a government boondoggle. The idea that you can take a slice of a company and you can have a tiny slice of it, and the people working there can't just leave and start their own exact same company, but you don't get a slice of it anymore. The idea that that is the way things can work must be enforced by government. Otherwise, the software engineers or the accountants or any other intelligence worker that's out there could say, actually, all of us are joining a union. The union is called the exact same thing plus workers, and you just do the same job, but without giving anything to the stock owners. So there must be a government entity creating a market inefficiency to create stocks as a means of investment in the first place.
That is correct, yes.
So that's what I'm talking about, invisibility. The people that are on food stamps know that they're on food stamps, and they can't take their free money from the government and spend it on booze. But the upper middle class with a bunch of stocks can retire on it and buy all the booze they want from the exact same system of government force that makes the stuff that people are making and the value of it go to someone else.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I believe that the best way to put it is that, and if we go to the extremes, right?
Sure.
Going to the extremes, homelessness is a requirement of capitalism. It is a threat put upon everybody else who isn't homeless. Either you do what we say, you accept a worse paycheck, you accept worse deals from your landlord, or else you end up like that. And whatever you're dealing with now is better than that.
And that is, how to put it, it's not a requirement, I would say, but it is a threat by. And in some nations, the workers have rights. They still have capitalism. That is to say, they still have shares in companies that are moving around. But they also have an incredible amount of limitations on how much any one person can accumulate and how much more they get taxed when they do that. In those countries, like Denmark, you'll find a homeless person here or there. That is someone who is suffering from a psychotic break, usually because of drugs, and who does not want to be helped in any way, which is the story they tell us about homeless today, but that isn't close to the truth.
Right. And if we get back to the dragon example,
DRGN, yeah.
If we get back to DRGN, the thing to understand about DRGN is the reason why I was so interested in doing it the way we were doing it is because I got pissed. Mm-hmm. I was just driving Uber.
Yeah.
And then I noticed things throughout like 2022 and 2023. Between 2020 and 2023, the homeless population of Albuquerque exploded like 2 to 3-fold.
Yeah.
And I noticed that there were people who had infants living on the streets in America, in the desert, with no shelter.
Right.
No available water and food
No,
outside of
not.
what people would give them.
Obviously, nowhere to bathe.
Yeah, obviously nowhere to bathe. Living in the fucking Albuquerque heat.
So the question is, why didn't they pick themselves up by their bootstraps?
Because they didn't even have boots.
Good point with the boot analogy. That is what Martin Luther King said as well. It's a sick joke to tell a man with no boots to pick himself up by his bootstraps.
Yep, it's okay. The FBI killed him for that.
You know, I'm sure it was an accident and it wasn't the FBI, and also, yes, it was.
Yeah, of course.
That said, I think it was worth trying. I think it was worth trying to get
it was
out there.
absolutely worth trying, and I'd do it again.
I mean, knowing what I know today, I would have pulled what you called Operation Ripcord a few months earlier.
Yes, I would have pulled Operation Ripcord a few months earlier. The situation is, like, we didn't make money doing this.
No, we lost
we did nothing but lose money. But we weren't going into it to make money. We were just trying to make it stable enough in order to...
so that they can own their own means of production.
So that they could own their own means of production. But the fact of the matter is that the system is designed so that if you don't already have a huge amount of capital, something like this is basically an unachievable endeavor.
And this is why shares in companies makes it impossible to have real competition. Real competition, you would have a market clearing equilibrium for the best company, and the best company would have a market clearing equilibrium for the best workers. And that would mean the vast majority of the wealth generated by the company would go to the workers, and the lowest cost, best quality would be produced by those workers. That is the market clearing rational equilibrium on all market efficiencies. So when you see a place that's making profit for shareholders, that's a market inefficiency. It has to be. Either it's a market inefficiency on the labor side or it's a market inefficiency on the price side. But in any regard, excess profit must mean there's something wrong with the ideal market. And that means, and I know exactly where it's coming from. Money that's coming from billionaires in New York is going into worse companies to keep them wealthy and afloat, so those better companies can take more money and shut down competition.
Oh, yeah. But you're acting as though that is an inefficiency and not part of the system itself.
Well, the term inefficiency means a thing that isn't following the rational expectations of economics.
Oh, sorry, that's where you're confused. There's no rational expectations of economics.
Right. This is my point, right? Every time economics comes up with something that's like, well, this is the rational way things should work. Of course, things don't work that way, so we study why it's different. What they never ask is, well, why is it that we have these insane inefficiencies, non-rationalities on the side of laborers selling their labor? Why is it they're not smartly selling their labor? And it's exactly what you said. We threaten them with homelessness if they don't do it. If we threaten Coca-Cola with blowing up their factories if they didn't sell all their Coke, then they would lower the price.
Yep. Coca-Cola used to make a reasonable margin. What is like a reasonable margin? You can tell me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
It was like 10%?
So Coca-Cola used to be famous for making 3 cents on the dollar.
So they would make 3%.
Yes, 3%.
3% returns was acceptable.
Yeah, well, 3% on the cost of goods sold. Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't 3% per annual because you can do lots of sales, right?
Yeah, no. I just meant like 3% per unit.
3%, yeah, 3 cents on the dollar. If you bought a 50-cent Coke, you're giving them a penny and a half.
And we're currently dealing with a world in which, say,
brands, Pepsi Cola is making 20%.
And we're also dealing with a situation where you could like, there used to be, and you tell me about this. I remember hearing, through like an economics class and reading like a couple of books on the matter about this thing called the Big Mac Index. Can you go over the Big Mac Index and tell us if it still applies?
Yeah, so the great thing about the Big Mac Index is that it's impossible to compare prices between countries because there's so many things that go into building the cost of something in a country. So, for example, if you buy a Big Mac in Japan, there's Big Macs everywhere, right? So if you buy a Big Mac in Japan, then the cost of the wheat goes into it, the cost of the cows go into it, the cost of the labor goes into it, the cost of the tomatoes go into it. Tomatoes are much more expensive in Japan. The wheat has much shorter distance to travel. People work for less money because nearly everything costs substantially less as well. So the question is, after you take into account the value of the income that people have in the international market for trading their dollars, their like yen for dollars, and you compare that against the cost, once translated to dollars, for a Big Mac, do you have equal purchasing power? So that's how you know how many Big Macs could I buy with my paycheck is the international value, or at least it used to be, until McDonald's decided, no, we're McDonald's. We have a monopoly force on the mind share of people. We have a monopoly force on supply chains across many different sectors. We vertically integrated a lot of our production so that other people can't get the stuff that we can, where in places they aren't and can't be because we are selling in a way that keeps everyone else out. And we have so much money beforehand that we can market so hard every child knows McDonald's. So with the ability to monopolize in all those 4 directions, over the past decade, most fast food's gone up 30%. McDonald's has gone up 100%, but it hasn't gone up 100% everywhere. It's only gone up 100% in places like America where there aren't consumer protections. In Japan, it stayed steady with everyone else.
So you're telling me that a Big Mac here is now more expensive than a Big Mac in, say, Switzerland.
Yeah. So, yeah, for example, that's a great example. So it used to be that if you went to a expensive nation, let's say France, Switzerland, these are great places. They tend to be more expensive because the labor is more expensive by a long shot.
And the Big Macs have Swiss cheese on them.
Right. Again, the quality that they produce and the amount they produce. The quality is high, amount is low. The rules around how you can produce things, you're not allowed to produce the cheapest like feedstock that you can here where we feed cows to cows, right? It has to be different in different places.
Right. There are ingredients in the McDonald's bun that are illegal that are legal in the United States, but illegal basically everywhere else on Earth.
Well, that's because when it comes to the individual being free in America, we default to no, you're not free unless you can prove it's okay. In Europe, they default to yes, you are free unless you can prove it's a bad thing. On the other hand, for businesses in Europe, they default to, no, you can't add that chemical, no, you can't do that process unless you can prove it's safe for the people. And in America, we say, sure, add whatever chemicals you want, do whatever process you want. We'll figure out if it's a problem later. So that's just a little upside down world that you got everywhere else. Also, America's the bad place.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, it can definitely feel like that.
Well, there's opportunities here. There's opportunities here to exploit other people.
Yeah. Hey. You know, that sounds like a wonderful idea.
It's a winning idea.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a winning idea. Yeah. It's just soul crushing.
It worked for my grandfather, worked for me, and God bless America. It's working for us today. To quote Tony Stark.
Oh yeah. So God, wouldn't it be great if Elon Musk was like Tony Stark and not the other way, and not him pretending to be? There was a way for him to have been a real American hero. It would have been great
if his heart were blown out by terrorists. I agree.
No. He had the chance to become a true American hero where everybody would love him the way that he wants them to, instead of being a fucking villain with just a cult. And it was simple and it was easy. He spent $44 billion on Twitter. Had he taken that money and spent it on housing the homeless, he would have had billions left over and everybody would love him. But instead, he's a villain.
No, instead he bought 3 branches of government.
Yeah, instead he bought 3 branches of government, and he will be known as a villain throughout history.
No.
When America eventually gets over its fascist takeover and gets back to where back to trying to be
the dream of America,
the dream of America,
its own best promises.
Yeah, when it attempts to get back to its core beliefs,
when it stops being the bad place.
When it stops being the bad place, then he's going to be taught as a villain throughout all of American history. He is going to be an Aaron Burr.
Oh yeah. And Aaron Burr, I mean, he was vice president, almost became president, and is remembered as neither thing.
Right.
He's remembered as a villain who shot somebody who was truly good for our nation.
Yep.
And that was before the rap battle.
Yeah, and that was before the rap battle.
Right. You didn't need Lin-Manuel Miranda's brilliance to turn that into a fact. It was what we knew from simple milk advertisements before.
I think that cut is so deep that you had to use a laser.
I'm sorry. I think that the only thing anyone ever knew about Aaron Burr and Hamilton before the play Hamilton was that Aaron Burr shot Hamilton, and a guy had been called to answer the question, but had bit into a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he was unable to answer the phone call from the radio DJ so he could answer the question because he did not got milk.
Yes. I have to apologize to our audience. The sandwich did not contain jelly. It was just peanut butter,
that
like a goddamn monster.
Well, and what kind of monster has, quote, the bullet that shot him on his wall, the kind of monster who doesn't use jelly?
This all makes sense.
So, that said, America's promise to have institutions that follow technocratic order and are free of arbitrary decision making.
Now you're using some big words.
America's promise to follow the rules no matter who you are and not have some dude who can do whatever he wants break those rules. That has always had a little bit of a moratorium. You could always say, okay, well, actually, King gets to play a little. We've always got King gets to play a little. We stole it from the British. And King gets to play a little is to be able to say, hey, you broke the law, but I pardon you.
Right.
Like in so many Schindler's Lists. And they can even pardon themselves, like in so many Schindler's Lists. But what Biden did was not just pardon his son. Pardoning his son, I could pardon. Presidents play a little. They get a few million on the side, and they're like, oh, my buddy gave me a few million. I'm going to pardon him for tax evasion. He can come on home. No need to run anymore, buddy. This has happened for every president. And if Joe Biden said, my son was rightfully convicted, but he's my son, and I have the power, and I'm going to protect my son, and that's what I'm doing, I would have pardoned him too.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. Did you hear what he said?
No, I didn't watch it.
It is the worst thing, and maybe I shouldn't talk about this, but I will. He said, and I quote, "The Justice Department went after my son because it's politicized."
I mean, he was right.
But if you say that politics is driving prosecution, then you, as the person who is in charge, is saying the justice system is corrupt and it needs to be...
I'm going to interrupt you here, and I agree with your point of view, but from my perspective, this is what's going on. The rules are out the window. The idea of laying rules down and making more stringent rules, hoping that the bad actors will just suddenly start following them, is over.
Yeah. This is what it was. So the reason I'm bringing this up, because I didn't care, but I have a colleague who was crying. She came to America because she believed in America.
Well, she came at the wrong time.
No, I mean, she'd been here for a while. I mean, she had a PhD. She has a son that's an American, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she came here because she believed in America, and she said, well, there was always corruption, but it's supposed to be under the table.
Yeah.
And if you do something corrupt, you're supposed to make up an excuse.
I think that Biden doesn't have the capacity to make an excuse anymore. I think that
he's mentally incapable.
Right. I think what he did was save his son, knowing that if he did not do this, that Trump might have taken it out on his son with the ability to do so because his son is a criminal.
Well, that's not a crazy thing to say. And if Biden had said that, that would be something different.
Right. But
Biden
unfortunately,
attacked the system itself just like Trump has. Legitimating.
Had Biden come out swinging, attacking the system, he would have and ran. He would have won.
And this is true because the truth is that liberal ideology is failed ideology. It is an idea that smarter and smarter people can make more stringent rules, just like you're saying, and box in the worst aspects of humanity and make sure that people do the best possible thing. And the problem with that is that pisses people off. And it only stands as long as everyone in charge is one of those technocrats, the people with all the power and strength in the world. As long as they still hold that world together, they will keep winning. But as soon as someone starts to rabble-rouse with the people, hey, look at all this control these people have taken over from you. These authoritarian centrists, which is the system that we have today, authoritarian centrism.
Yes.
They say, look at those authoritarian centrists. Half the time, you're screwed. Do you really want authoritarian centrism? And they're like, no, we don't. Wouldn't you prefer to have a little freedom? And by freedom, I mean getting rid of the authoritarianism on the side that you're not on. And they're like, yeah, get rid of that authoritarianism. And so every single time we have a liberal democracy where you go back and forth between which authoritarian system you have, one of them rabble-rouses, imagines a better world, and takes over, whether it's on the left or the right. And this time it was on the right.
And yeah, exactly. And the problem is that the people who voted and the people who didn't vote, the people who voted for it and the people who just didn't vote are going to get the world they voted for. And that world is not going to be a good place.
So there are winners and losers every time there's a revolution. And you can make a world that sounds better. If you control the media, if you control the message, then you can create a worse world for a lot of people and tell them it's a better world.
So
Fox News is going to report how great everything is once Trump is in office.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem, this is the worst possible outcome, but I've got like 40% bet on it. Everything's great, like literally awesome for the first 2 years. Because you can goose your economy. You can make all the money flow real fast. You can make the jobs spike. You can make everyone look like they're rich for a really short period of time. Just enough to shore up your power in the second term.
Oh, yeah, I remember this strategy. There was a guy who did this. He had a really funny mustache.
Yeah. So Charlie Chaplin was loved for a reason. and a lot of people don't know about the later Chaplin. But once he became the great dictator in the talkies, it really was quite different. If you look at the great dictator, it was about people sick of liberalism. This moderate liberalism, and how they just wish they had a great dictator who did not want for himself, but did want for the people, instead of these power players who were playing the little liberal game. Really, the only liberal game you need to know about is taxes. The Byzantine system of taxation that we have today does not exist as a mistake. It's not impossible to file business taxes without an accountant on accident. We fixed taxes and could do it by computer in the 1980s. The accountants demanded changes to the law so the accountants would remain relevant.
I think that this is an important message that people should know, and that is, another hang heads lowly, child is slowly taken. And in the violence causes silence, who are we mistaken? But you see, it's not me, it's not my family. In your head, they are fighting.
And that's Irish people fighting each other, which I think is the second worst thing to happen in the history of humanity.
Irish people?
Fighting each other.
Oh.
we ought to be having a united front against the English. I think that's pretty obvious.
Oh, yeah. I think that everybody should be against the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire became the British Empire, which then eventually became the American Empire.
So there's another upside to Donald Trump. He is very, very bad for America, which is bad for its empire.
I mean, yeah, I'm just, it sucks for the people who live in it and the people who live without it.
Yeah, so it would be an opportunity to shift the empire of violence into an empire of opportunity if we took the worldview that America espouses of individual opportunity and used our strength economically to push out of the way the existing economic elite in all these other countries and freed the entrepreneurial potential of people throughout the world, everyone on Earth would be better off because there'd be so much more creativity and innovation, and the best of the best would thrive.
Fuck it. Let's just get rich.
Yeah, fuck it. Let's do a fascism.
Let's just abuse them and get rich.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they are the poors. Jesus.
Was a poor. He didn't believe in the monies. He believed that the monies had dude's face on it, and that means that dude owned that money.
That I knew a guy who said that, read about him, and he was right about that. But now he's missing toes. That was Hungry Frank, and Hungry Frank was just quoting Jesus.
I mean, like, I don't think
I shouldn't say that. Frank's going to listen to this.
I mean, like, our brother Frank.
Yeah.
Our brother Frank is, he's always been ahead of the curve when it comes to this sort of thing.
He was so right for so long.
So right for so long. And the fact of the matter is that he was so ahead of the curve and so right for so long and nobody would give him the time of day on it because it was objectively insane when he was saying it.
The idea of eliminating money is both objectively insane and the right answer.
Correct.
Also, his idea that a robot could figure out all the resources and where to put them
was 100%
he was right.
correct.
He was right. Yes. We need robo-overlords, please.
We need the robot overlord.
Why are we not having robot overlords?
Humans clearly cannot handle the logistics side of things.
I'm running for president. I am announcing that I am running for president in 2028. However, I guarantee everything I do, I will run through a very well-optimized chat robot and various other AI. But everything I do will be optimized through AI. I'll still make the decisions. I'm a smart man, perhaps the smartest, because I'm smarter than Trump, and he might be the smartest. So there you go. So I'm running for president. I will be the first AI presidential candidate.
And your vice president can be,
A tin can.
well, I mean, like, I don't think it's appropriate to.
I'm using anti-robot slurs. I know.
Yeah.
Please forgive me. I'm an old man and I'm learning to accept transhumanism. All right. When it was my day, we called them toasters and Cylons and put them out of airlocks. We had video games and movies and board games.
Hey, I want to stop you right there. Well, they're robots. Cylons don't need to breathe. So when you
Yeah.
threw them out the airlock,
Well, yeah, but then they couldn't get back on the ship. You can't swim back.
I mean, we don't know that they don't have a thruster up their butt.
You know what they do? They have a butt up their butt.
Do they have a butt up their butt?
They can just fart their way back.
This is a good point.
One time when I was trying to get the dragon logo done, I went to Fiverr to get someone to do it, and I was like, that wasn't very good. And he was like, all right, here's your refund. And I never used him again. But I used a different person who was clearly the same person, and he gave me back a flying robot that was farting. I wasn't even mad. He earned his money.
Whoa. Do we still have that? Can that be the
we
logo?
Still have, yes, it can.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? That's the image for this episode.
The image for this episode will be the flying, farting robot. I think that's an appropriate image. And on that bombshell,
All right.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to DRGN podcast.
you didn't say thank you. Thank you is a weak way to end. It is your honor to have listened.
Yeah, it is.
To
It
us.
is your honor. I just want to go ahead and give a thank you to our sponsor, Velveeta Cheese.
Velveeta. It's the cheesiest.